So I wouldn't call 12 Strong an action movie in the sense that there's a lot of hand-to-hand combat and fight choreography, really cool death scenes, but as far as showing great battle scenes where you get a sense of the scope of the battle and you see rockets whizzing by, you see tanks, you see cars flipping over, you see the bullets just whizzing and the explosions, it just gives you a sense of that epic spectacle. So in that sense, it is an action movie that I think is worth seeing on the big screen, and I would actually recommend seeing this in theaters if you are going to see it. Not since the last Transformers I saw have I seen more explosions, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, and some of the explosions were some of the best I've seen. There's this one where it's explosion after explosion after explosion going kind of in a line, but rather than shooting it from the top, the camera's whizzing along, so each explosion is kind of taking place, but you get the sense of movement. It was just a great shot. Really worth seeing. And you get some really cool shots of people riding horses and shooting at the same time. I never understand the physics of this because I would think the recoil would knock them off balance and they'd fall over, but you can't deny it creates for some really cool images. And then also Chris Hemsworth, our hero, he's the only one that's really good at riding horses, and they bring it back to, well, he grew up on a ranch, and just when you couldn't love this hero anymore, it shows that his heroism, part of it was his blue-collar manual labor upbringing. It's just great. And you get to see a lot of military hardware and modern weapons. There's the bazookas, the artillery, the 50 cal, but then also you get a real sense of what modern warfare is like versus what ancient warfare was like. So a lot of the warfare here you see is they're this elite scouting unit and they go out into enemy territory and they just have to find the enemy, and then they call in, oh, to the Air Force, this is where the enemy is, and then you see the B-52s go over and drop the bombs. It's just interesting, so different than in olden days when, two armies would line up and they would just go head to head. And I'm just a sucker for movies about Afghanistan. I just find when you see just the emptiness and the space and the desert and this desolation, and then you pair it with modern weapons and modern geopolitics, and you show how these things just come together through historical accident, it's just really fascinating. And one of the coolest things about this movie is it's a true story about real heroes who went and scored this great victory, but then because of classified, military strategy, they weren't able to share this victory with anyone for many years. So they went home and they just lived normal lives and no one really knew about their heroism. And something about that appeals to me. There's a lot of heroes out there who, yeah, they're heroic and it's great, but something about sometimes the fame that they achieve and how much praise they get, it cheapens their heroism. There's something pure about this kind of unsung heroism that's really appealing. I thought the casting and the performances were about as good as it gets for me. Chris Hemsworth as the lead totally pulled it off. I thought he did a great job. I never felt like I was watching a movie star or Thor. I always felt like I was watching this military commander. Think more what Bradley Cooper was able to do in American Sniper versus Mark Wahlberg in any action movie. I love Mark Wahlberg, but you always kind of feel like you're watching Mark Wahlberg. And with the supporting characters, they did an okay job, not a great job, but an okay job showing little details about their lives that makes you see them as human beings and really feel some suspense when you have these battle scenes. Yeah, you suspect that the mission is going to be ultimately successful, but you don't know if one or two of these characters are going to die, and when you start to see them as characters you like and you know some of their backstory, you get some suspense. And I'll give credit to Michael Shannon in particular. He was great in Shape of Water, but he was great in this as well. Just this guy who always works hard, does his job, pays his dues. You feel he's underemployed. He has never really risen up to the promotion and the pay level and the respect that he should have, but nonetheless, he doesn't complain. He just keeps continuing to do a good job. Just that classic military figure that you really root for. A minor complaint of mine is how they handled the Taliban, the main villains. I feel like the Taliban, they were so bad and evil. They banned music, they executed people in soccer stadiums, people didn't like them. There was no need to just go over the top. I'm talking about one scene in particular where they just really seem to be driving home that the Taliban is just the epitome of evil, and they were, but I just felt like they could have just handled it not quite as heavy-handed, and the main villain was pretty forgettable. I feel like they could have just had the Taliban as a whole as the main villain. They didn't really have to personalize it into this one guy, but it did make for one kind of satisfying scene at the end, so I guess it was alright. And then William Fichtner, he's not a villain, he's kind of a bit of an antagonist. I thought he did a better job playing this villainish role. Most people probably know him as the cop from Prison Break. He was really good in this. He's almost unrecognizable. You might not recognize him at first. And on that point, he's the bureaucratic guy back at home who seems kind of out of touch about what the war is actually like. I think the people who criticize this for not really being about politics at all and not really saying anything about the war and just being this rah-rah feel-good movie, it's somewhat fair criticism, but it's not entirely fair. They do touch on issues. It shows how the American troops, when they went over there, they were very ignorant about the culture and what it was actually like there, didn't really speak the language, and how that caused problems and difficulty with them trusting their allies on the ground and having this cultural conflict. It also talked about the people back home, the bureaucrats, planning the war, strategizing, how they didn't always seem to give enough resources. That was a big criticism of this, and particularly Iraq, where there weren't enough resources and the military was underfunded. And then at the end, after they've had this victory, immediately they talk about the Uzbek commander on the ground is like, look, it's a quagmire. A lot of empires have gotten mired here. You're my brother today, but tomorrow you'll be my enemy. So it drives home that point of like, yes, this was a great victory, but in the broader war, it was a lot more messy and complicated. So I think it did not an amazing job talking about the politics of the conflict, but it did try and make an effort.